My name's Gino, and I'm sitting here with the lovely Miss Jessica, who has told me it's okay to introduce her as Dope Jew.
I didn't say he could say that.
Oh my God, you can't say that. You didn't say. You told me to
I'm
say that.
just joking. I told him to say that.
On the record. But she is a dope Jewish lady, dope Jew. And I had permission to say this, everyone, from Jessica herself. Now, Jess, I gotta say, love the fit.
Thank you.
Jessica often wears very dope fits, and it does not disappoint. What also does not disappoint is Jessica and I started a friendship not all that long ago, and we had such a dope day the first time we hung out because we were doing like some healing rituals and stuff. And that's actually going to be the topic of our conversation, you know, quantum healing, and I think you called it psychomagic?
Psychomagic.
Well, Jess, firstly, just tell us, like, how would you even define, like, quantum healing and psychomagic?
Okay, so we'll start with psychomagic. So psychomagic was created by this man named Alejandro Jodorowsky, and he is I think he's Spanish, I want to say.
Well, the name like that, I got it.
You told me not to say anything that's going to get me canceled, but
I did say
it might
that.
be a different Latin American country. Spain is not a Latin American country. Anyways, so he is a filmmaker. He is a filmmaker, a shaman, a psychotherapist, all the things. And he created this thing called psychomagic, which is basically performing a poetic act that kind of like puts a little like kink in the quantum field, kind of like shocking your system into creating some type of new change or creating transformation through this act. And there's a documentary about it called Psychomagic. So like one of them was like these two sons who always they competed for their mom's love. So they took both of them and like they did like this weird interpretive dance where their heads were like up against one another and like they were nestled into their mom and just like really weird stuff. So me and Gino decided to do a psychomagic ritual together.
On a snowy Wednesday night in Skokie and Evanston. Yes, we did. And before we even go into unpacking all that, which before anyone thinks like, oh, that sounds weird, that shit worked. It really actually helped. And I'd love to tell more about my experience and how that helped. But, you know, you threw out a couple terms, and one of which is this, like, quantum field, which, I know what that means to me, but, like, when you say, like, quantum field, like, what is that, like, what's that like for you? Okay,
so I was I wasn't nervous to come on the podcast, but I knew that I was going to be asked questions about quantum healing, and that I was going to be calling myself a quantum healer, and there was going to be this moment where I was like, I don't even know how to explain anything with quantum healing at all.
Well, you just got to say, like, what does it mean to you?
Yeah. So, the quantum field is basically everything, right? We have energy and information that is not visible to the eye, but that is all around us. And, it's kind of, using techniques to shift that kind of thing. So, like, I am trained in a modality called the Lifeline technique, which is a quantum healing technique that helps to reprogram the subconscious mind. So that didn't answer your question at all.
No, that's okay.
But, so what we did was we came up with a ritual that involved, how did it start? Remember we tried to break the glass and it didn't break?
That was at the end. And yes, we failed miserably to break a fucking drinking glass. And frankly, I'm embarrassed that you even brought that up. No, how did it begin? It started with we came up with all the steps.
Right. We came up with all the steps.
Mm-hmm. And then did we do something with water? We drank the water? No, that was a different thing. I'm struggling to remember exactly how we started.
Okay, the only things that I can really remember at this point. So we, I convinced Gino to crack an egg with his head. And
that
he
went
did
as
it
well as you could have imagined. It actually was far worse.
But you did it in a really weird, like, non-intuitive way, I remember.
Well, I didn't like what you would think how someone would crack an egg with their head is like hammer-like, where they'd go.
Right.
But I tried that and I didn't commit.
Right.
So what I did was more. And it was so
That's
dumb.
what it was.
It did work.
Yeah,
it did
yeah.
crack the egg. But that was at the end. As I recall, it was the egg was like the last thing we did is we did something nice, which was eating chocolate. But you had
Right.
chips because you didn't want chocolate. And then before that, we had there was the rope cutting.
Yeah, we have to talk about that.
There was the rope cutting. So we're going from backwards.
Okay.
So it was the egg.
Yes.
It was the chocolate, the egg, the rope cutting, the dancing, the lifeline. And then before that,
yeah, we should talk about your lifeline session because that was
that
actually
was the more important thing.
Okay.
I forget exactly how we started it, but really when it started going deep and becoming something meaningful for me, it was when we were doing the lifeline session.
Yeah. Do you want to share your experience of that?
So, well, before I do, why don't you explain to them how lifeline works?
Okay. I'm still trying to figure it out. Basically, it was created by this chiropractor on the North Shore, and it's a 16-step thing that incorporates 14 different modalities. So it's everything from neurolinguistic programming to aromatherapy. But basically, the main thing is muscle testing, which is actually really cool. If you do not know what muscle testing is,
We talk about muscle testing all the time on the show.
Oh,
This is
yeah,
we're
okay.
big David Hawkins
okay,
people
so
here,
people, so people know.
most likely.
Okay, so yeah, I use muscle testing. So we didn't do all the steps because it takes 2 hours, but with Gino, we reprogram some of the chakras because the idea is that there's there's information that is stored within each of the chakras, and when you've experienced a traumatic event, it stores itself within one of the particular chakras. So was yours we were working with your solar plexus
It
chakra?
was the solar plexus.
Yeah, so we were working with solar plexus chakra, so we used a bunch of different tools. We used
But just to one thing that was really crazy is that for people who don't know what muscle testing is, which I'm getting maybe they don't because some of the people in the audience laughed what the fuck are they talking about? How are they just jumping past that? It's this.
do you want me to show you, or
Yeah.
Okay, come here.
Okay.
All right, let's do it. Okay. So the idea is that the muscles in the body have intelligence. So when you say something like love, 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 but even just by speaking that aloud, the muscle's going to lock out because there's coherence or synchronization within the conscious and the subconscious mind. So hold
And
your
the muscles will stay strong, essentially. Should I do my arm out
That's what
or
I just said, Gino. Okay, put your
Can
your
you
arm
tell
like
we're
this.
friends?
Put your arm like this.
Like this?
Yeah, that's perfect. Okay, so now say love, love, love.
Love, 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 love.
Okay, hold strong. Okay, so do you see how the muscle popped back up? Basically, that's a lockout. Okay?
Okay.
So that means that your subconscious and conscious minds are on board with one another. Okay, now say fear, fear, fear.
Fear, 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 fear.
Okay. Hold strong. You see how it gave way? So it gave way because he's automatically going into that fight or flight response. There's not that synchronization. We're not done.
Oh.
Now say love, love,
This is
love.
going to be a different kind of interview. I'm loving this. I'm loving this. Love, 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 love.
Hold strong. And then you see the muscle locked out because there's now the synchronization. So that's just a small example. But what we did with him, I'm not going to put you on blast of what emotions we were working with, but there's a whole list. So this entire modality is channeled. I don't know where this man got this from the ether, from some guides, from some people. But basically there's a list of 50 different emotions. And you muscle test to see what emotion you're working with. And then you process that and you're trying to release stuck charge that's in the subconscious mind. So when you experience trauma, there's charge. And by processing, doing this whole thing that you go through, you're able to kind of allow that energy to move through.
And that's where I'd love to come share my experience. Now, the first thing that was so interesting, because I would not blame people if they watch, the film and the muscle testing thing, and it's okay, how do you know it's not for show? And the truth is you don't, because you're just watching video. But what was so interesting was, so Jess was doing testing to see what area of the body we're going to work with. And through whatever the Lifeline program is, it has certain thoughts and stuff to work on based on the part of the body. And so she was doing her testing. She was going super quick. It was boom, boom, boom. And she landed on the solar plexus. So my gut. which to me immediately was like crazy. And granted, she was doing this on her own body. She wasn't like testing my arm. And that was crazy because, regular people who watch the show, keep up with my own spiritual journey, know that I've been doing a lot of somatic practices to try to release energy. And a big part of my spiritual practice is like keeping an awareness of the inside of my body. And what I know is that my solar plexus right here has a big sensation of an energetic block. It gets tight very frequently. I feel anxiety through there. I have like a very bad feeling there whenever I'm experiencing negative emotion. And that was something I had not told Jess, but she like honed in on it like instantly. And when we were actually doing the practice, which to me was really the most important part of the ritual, I think, and I think everything else was, we'll talk about that too. She would like guide me through like asking questions. I will say what emotion it was. It was the feeling of not feeling safe in the inside of the body, which, yeah, because I'm doing all this internal awareness and it's like, okay, I'm internally aware. There's all these bad feelings in here and I don't feel like I'm even able to get past them. And she would, I forget exactly how I went, but you'd ask me a question and you'd tell me to either visualize a thing.
Feel, hear.
See, feel, hear. And it was so incredible because as we did that, they talk about in somatic work, you'll have release and it's often in like shaking. And I've been doing all this work, but I hadn't had that experience. Oh my God, it was like instant. I think you recalled that it was pretty powerful.
Hands.
Yeah.
Yeah, the hands.
Yeah, my hand just started like just shaking.
That's
and
Jesus.
And it would just process. And the what I didn't share was that as we were going through it, there was a certain point where I had this very visceral inner sensation that like what felt like a stuck energy right here, it was like someone had opened up a faucet. It just went straight down. It just like went away. And it was so visceral and uncanny. And like right after that, with that and whatever the shaking does, I mean, I don't know if you remember, like it was like a changed person after that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You said the faucet thing because that is a particular practice that energy healers and therapists will use. They'll say like visualize water. And also, do you remember the element? So the other thing is that you muscle test to see what it's the chakra and then what element is out of balance as a result, and yours was water.
Yeah.
And then you were using the visualization of water to move the energy.
And, I also want to give a shout out to a previous guest, Shruti, who I think is a mutual friend of ours, because when she was talking about energy work and somatics and stuff, she said a big thing for her was visualizing like something that she felt helped. And I remembered that. And that helped me to trust, just like pick the images that I thought would make sense. And like the faucet thing, when you had said water, I even to this day, I still use that visualization when I'm trying to like let go of stuck energy. But then, the ritual continued on from there.
Yeah, so we did like I found this, I'm just going to say, I don't know how to explain it without saying it, but basically we found this like rope that belonged to me and my ex, and I was like, this needs to go. Why do I have this? So we did this like
well, what had happened is that we were talking at some point, we were both kind of going through it with some people who, we'd been involved with romantically. And, I'll be honest, I was, it's so inhuman to say, oh yeah, I'm still caught up on, old feelings for an ex. Like who would have guessed? And, I was really hopeful, and I feel like this did help a lot with moving that. And so we were using the rope to symbolize we're untying each other.
Right. And we cut the rope off of each other.
Yeah. We like wrapped it around
with like
each
a
other
knife.
With a knife. It was so batty. And it was a lot of fun though.
It was fun.
Although I do remember one point she put it around my neck and she had the knife and was just like, and I remember I'm just sitting there like, I'm going to trust the universe. But this woman got a knife in my throat. And also, mind you, this was like the first time we'd formally hung out.
Yeah, it was the first time we hung out.
I definitely felt, though, that the symbology of that did help. Though, I feel like that was particularly important to you as well. That the rope cutting.
Yeah, I felt like it like made me attract even crazier people.
Oh,
I thought it was going to be like a new start. But
well, you're no longer tied down. Now you're truly floating away.
No, but I actually am happy that I did that cord cutting with like me and my ex.
Yeah, you know, because, well, we won't go into that, though. I do know that was something that was really weighing on your mind at the time.
Yeah.
You know, it was interesting, Jess, because way earlier on in season 1, we did actually have a magician on the show, our good friend Zeus from the Alchemist Book Club. And we were talking about magic and traditional religion. And a big thing he was talking about magic as like a set of spiritual practices is that, you know, symbology is extremely important to the human mind. And so, you know, frankly, I'm really not surprised that, you know, psychomagic, even if people might be a little off put by the name or love the name, that's why it's called that. Because a lot of the, you know, the symbols and the pictures, and then I love how in the practice you interact with those pictures. Like it's not just something you visualize like in a more, my understanding of a more traditional like magic practice. It's a lot of visualization. You know, we got to get down and dirty in the physical, you know. What do you think? Why do you think, you know, symbols can play an important role in like healing or in practices like this?
Yeah. So when you bring that up, the first thing that I think about is like, so with Reiki, I'm a Reiki master teacher. So I attune people to Reiki, and there's like these symbols. They're secret symbols. You can like look them up. Anyone can look them up, but you're not supposed to. But there's like these secret.
The curse of the internet.
These secret symbols that, you know, like invoke certain energies. There's one for distant healing. There's one for this. There's one for that. And it was like really interesting working with those and like kind of experiencing those.
Yeah, I mean, and this even, you know, you start to think of like, you know, big names like Jung, who of course, you know, wrote the book on it, and who had this firm belief that symbols have a deep and important part to human consciousness.
Oh wait, let me say one other thing.
Please.
It's because like it's also very significant with the subconscious mind. Because
Well, that's even what Jung was saying. It's
that's
all
how it gets coded.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because your conscious mind, I think, you know, the outer human self, the conscious mind, yeah, symbol can be important, and largely because like you've assigned importance to it, and that's like just a thought that you're like, yeah, I jive with that. But what I think a lot of people in certain spiritual practices or maybe even psychoanalytic practices are trying to say is that below the surface, it seems like the subconscious part of the psyche just interacts with symbols in a way that's very powerful and wouldn't be extremely obvious to the outer mind. I mean, in essence, the subconscious mind itself is just not obvious to the conscious mind. But, you know, it's interesting how we're learning to tap into that, like, and to use it in stuff like, say, healing or a therapy. What I really enjoyed, what I didn't get across was that, again, like, I was so surprised because after we did the Lifeline and before we did the rope cutting, we, you know, Joss, unsurprisingly, is also involved in the ecstatic dance community because all my guests are involved in the ecstatic dance community. I honestly need to find someone outside to have on the show. You know, we had a chance to dance together, and we were dancing a little bit alone and a little bit contact. And, you know, sometimes when I'm out there dancing, and I'm sure this is not surprising to a lot of people who maybe have danced before, it can feel awkward. It can feel like you're not really in your skin yet. But when I had that, like, visceral experience, like, I was so connected to my body. I was so fluid in my dance, and it was so enjoyable to dance with you. And I know that was part of, like, what we had experienced together. How you know, how do you think that the connection to the body plays in, like, this psychomagic or any sort of quantum healing?
I mean, that's what it all comes down to, honestly. Like, my favorite part, so we do the see, feel, hear. So go into the movie theater of your mind, see the images, feel in your body. And, like, those moments of working with clients, those are the most interesting moments. Because to see someone, like, to ask someone, does it have a shape? Does it have a color? Does it have a temperature? And people really be able to, like, hone in and connect and be like people can get, like, weirdly specific about things, and, you know, and they can tell you how much it weighs in pounds and colors and, like, all these different things. And I know for me as an air sign, I just intuitively am not, like, super connected to or naturally not super connected to my body. And I think that's why I crave these, like, hyper kind of like somatic spaces, like contact dance or burlesque or any of these things, because I'm not naturally as connected.
Oh my God, I resonate with that so much.
And it's so fascinating because like when you start doing this work with people, whether it's you like getting the session or giving a session or something, you really see sometimes people are connected, as I just mentioned, but most of the time people are so disconnected. And like I'll say like I'll ask like where in your body do you feel it, and then they'll like say like they'll like repeat like a thought or something. I'm like, okay, that's a thought, now let's go into the body, like where in your body do you feel it? But we're so primed to not be in the body, we like don't even have that language so much of the time.
It's so interesting because I remember I was teaching a class over at the School of Metaphysics, and we were doing practice with something called Life Force, which at the end of the day, if you do Life Force practice, it's practice feeling the inner sensations of the body. And I was trying, and that was something I connected with very easily, but I'm trying to talk to the students. I'm like, okay, feel it in your heart. And they were just so lost from it. And I was like, frankly, I didn't even know how to teach it, because I was like, what do you mean you don't have a lot of feeling in the inside of your body? Well, and then of course the thing is like, okay, well then just you're aware of the feeling of nothing, right? And then even that kind of throws people. You know, what was so interesting too with when you were guiding me through the visualizations, and my recommendation for anyone who does something like this, just trust it. Like even if you think you're making it up, just go with it. Was that the visualizations were extremely vivid, and while you're experiencing them, you almost have this feeling of doubt. It's like, does this picture actually matter?
Like the movie theater part?
Yes.
Yeah.
But then you start seeing the picture, and it's like, very quickly, it's like, wait a minute. That picture does matter to me, and like I can actually feel it like affecting my psyche in like a way that was therapeutic.
And then sometimes you have like a memory of like being in a second grade classroom, and it has absolutely nothing to do with, you think it has nothing to do with it, but it does on a subconscious level. So that's kind of what's interesting about it too, is you just never know.
Well, you know, something we talk about over at my school a lot is how the subconscious mind thinks a lot more in images, and you could say like what the images represent, or you could say like energies, whereas, you know, more so the conscious mind seems to think in more concrete ideas, and for some people that's language. Like unsurprisingly, a lot of people think in words. Yet what's very interesting, and which does make me think that maybe, you know, Freud and Jung were onto something with the whole symbology of the subconscious mind, is that it does seem like symbols and images do have an effect on the inner mind. And so I was very excited when that was part of the practice. What do you what's it like, you know, conducting this with somebody?
That's a good question. I feel like we were talking about this before the practice. I feel like people in the spiritual community get like a 1 month training, and they're like, I'm a therapist. And it's like, no, you're not. Like people say a lot of things, and oftentimes don't have like the training to back it up. So I did an 8-month training, which is a lot, but you know, there's always that like, what does it mean to be trauma informed kind of thing? You know what I mean? Can you even teach that? I don't know. Probably, but it's also intuitive, like being a healer. Like this, it just opens up so many questions about like what it means to be a healer, what's ethical, what's not ethical, whatever. But yeah, I mean, I'm just always like, when I'm conducting the sessions, I'm just feel like I'm in this constant state of just like curiosity and awe, as I shared. But it can also be nerve-wracking. It can be really boring. And because people can take like a really, really long time. So like you're processing probably like anywhere from like 5 to 20 emotions in one session. And like one emotion alone can take like 5 to 10 minutes. And then you can like go into something called a black hole. So like a black hole is like if the energy's not clearing, like say you're processing shame and like you do the see, feel, hear on shame, but it's not clearing. There's something that's like below shame. So I've had like emotions that it's like 3 other emotions tied to that original emotion that you have to get to clear before it'll actually like
That reminds me so much of a very good friend who is an extremely talented energy healer. Like, her experiences of her, like, they really blow me away. And she did a lot of training. And she was talking about, like, when she does her practice, she's like, yeah, if I'm just healing something physical, it's kind of draining. It takes a lot of work. I got to get into it. But she's like, but if I want to heal something emotional, she's like, if I'm healing something physical, it's like, okay, think of a mattress. It's like, okay, there's a rip in the top of the mattress. Let's sew that back together. She's like, okay, what if it's an emotional thing? She's like, okay, imagine if you took like a drink that had like food dye in it and you dumped it in the mattress. Now you have to clean the top. You have to clean the next layer and the next layer. Like, it's penetrated deep and you have to clean all of that.
Yeah, so this might like take like the like, I guess, smoke and mirrors off of some of this, but like if you're like a Reiki practitioner, like that doesn't mean that you're not like a talented person or like even like a talented healer. Like, you shouldn't call yourself a talented healer, but at the end of the day, that's not your energy. Like, it's energy that you're channeling.
Yeah.
And like in the training, my understanding and my training was very much like you were a conduit, and so it's not like rocket science. Like, it's really not.
That's interesting.
But maybe she's like using, there's like different.
She was using many different.
There are many
techniques.
different energies that are being channeled in many different ways that people are channeling energy. But I do think that it's like, yeah, just at the end of the day, it's being channeled through you, and that's like important to remember, especially like. Because I was like calling myself a healer for a long time, and now I'm like, oh, I don't like that. Doesn't resonate with me anymore.
It can get your ego wrapped up in it too.
Yeah, it's just the what do you call yourself? And then it's like holistic health, healing, wellness practitioner.
Well, you throw the word coach in there because
God.
people love that. But you said something earlier that I'd like to come back to, and you said, well, when it wasn't a boring experience, which I could imagine. I mean, a lot of. You think about a lot of healing, it's a lot of patience with people because things heal at the rate they heal. And a lot of times you just have to nurture it and you have to nurse it. But what you said was you were often in the state of like awe and curiosity. And curiosity keeps being this adjective or this mental state that I keep hearing from various people. Tell me more about what that experience of curiosity is like when you're engaging with a client.
Well, I guess I'm always curious, like if an emotion comes up, I'm like, oh, that's interesting, because it's like the emotions are this is not fun by any means. It's not a fun thing.
Guys, dealing with people's
like
worst traumas or energetic
because the emotions are like they will call you out, and they're like very specific, like what's like, I'm just trying to think of an example of like one, like not connected to inner child, like something like that, like just like something very specific. But interestingly, this isn't what you asked, but I just feel compelled to share this. Like,
oh, don't worry.
Okay, what I love about quantum healing and what I think we're going to see, like, from, like, a healing trend perspective is, like, more and more people are going to start doing practices like this because trauma is really hard to talk about and speak aloud, right? It's a felt sense. Trauma is an experience. It's not it's hard to put it into words. So, like, if you say to someone, like, tell me about, like, that time that this happened to you, like, it's traumatizing even speaking that aloud, and it can re-traumatize you. But if you say to someone, like, go into the movie theater of your mind and visualize it, the other thing that's really powerful about that is, like, as the practitioner, they don't have to tell me anything. I have no idea what they're going through internally. So that's like where the curiosity is coming from, because I hear the emotion, but I don't see what they see. They tell me what they feel. But then a lot of the time, like, remember we said, like, put the headphones on, like, what is shame telling you? So sometimes they'll speak that aloud, but other times we just move on, but they hear the message. So I'm always, like, curious kind of what information they're receiving.
No, that's really interesting that you brought it up, because I did feel very safe and able to experience things. And I mean, unsurprisingly, yeah, it's sometimes, even if it's not something trauma related, your thoughts in the human unconscious mind can be very shameful.
Embarrassing.
They can be embarrassing.
Yes.
They can be dirty. They can be extreme. They can
right.
be, thoughts can be very extreme. And, there's a reason why, you don't want to let people on your phone. That's like an extension of your brain. Because you can just be very open with that. But when it was like in the context of like, it's just me and I'm facilitated by someone, so I'm okay to experience it. Yeah, I wonder how much not having to say it aloud was just like allowed me to have a very visceral experience with it. With like the curiosity, are you just kind of like okay, like how can I bring them deeper? Like how can I get them to the root? Would you say that's kind of what you're curious about, or?
Um, I mean, I think for me, it's just like I'm very, I'm just really curious about the negative emotions, like specifically, like that's what kind of just like draws my interest, just because you would never have the experience of somebody like telling you these things unless it's like someone you're super close with. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And even then, they probably wouldn't be able to pin down like I'm having an experience right now where I don't feel like I can connect to my inner child because I feel shame because of this, because of that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you get a lot of therapy where you've been in counseling a lot before you even know that the vocabulary.
Right.
And I think that's also part of the goodness of being like, if you're going to do a session like this with someone who has like a lot of experience, some training, or like a system, because there are these specific thoughts or like you could say obstacles that people run into in the mind, and just having that framework helps a lot, you know.
Yeah, we didn't do the past life part.
No.
Yeah, so with the core limiting belief, you can take it as far as like, okay, so Gino has this core limiting belief that's being held in his solar plexus chakra. The water element is out of balance. Now let's muscle test to see if it's from this life or if it's from a past life. And I remember like it was getting crazy. Like in the training, people were like calling like the person who created this out because he was like, it was like 455 million BC, and then it was like, were they a person? Were they an alien? Were they non-binary? Like it was getting crazy, but somehow it works. I don't know how it works. But yeah.
Well, you know, if you want to give it the benefit of the doubt, it's like at a certain level, if it's a therapeutic thing, you know, if it works, it works. Like, who gives a fuck?
No, that's true. I've had
like,
to, yeah.
If you want to be like really gracious to someone who is not into this kind of thing, you know, you could even just say, okay, well, say there is no such thing as past lives, but maybe like data in the brain got stored that like pinged and that like released the neurons.
Right.
Or if you are more of a spiritual person, the Buddha said, he was once asked, like, how many lives have I had? One of his monks asked him. This is a story I had heard. And the Buddha said, you don't want to know that way more than you'd be comfortable knowing. And the Buddha's like, and the monk's like, no, Lord, I want to know. And he said, bhikkhu, which is like the Pali word for monk, he said, every being has had so many lives that just their tears alone could flood a planet 8 times.
I'm going to get canceled by like past life regressionists for saying this, but
oh no.
I feel like past life regression a lot of the time is not helpful. That has been my experience and what I've heard from other people, because it brings up like really like scary stories like a lot of the time, and like just I don't know, I think a lot of the time it can just kind of be damaging. I've seen this.
Well, you know, if you want to go on the track that, like, okay, let's say there are past lives. A lot of human history is very brutal. And if something that happened was so impactful that here you are several hundred years in the future and it's still bothering you, that was probably really gruesome. And, you know, maybe the seeing of it is not always useful, you know, because, you know, maybe at one level, what good does it know to re-experience? Like, oh yeah, I was like a Polish girl who my whole family died. And then like I walked into the forest and I saw the German soldiers and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to walk towards them.
Have you ever noticed how like everyone thinks they were like Cleopatra? Like, you were a peasant. You were not Cleopatra. Like everyone thinks they were like 3 historical figures.
Well, you have to be humble to really not only work well in spiritual concepts, but even just in therapeutic concepts. You know, I think we talked that you had read a Little Hawkins. Are you familiar with David Hawkins? I saw a video once where he was talking to this guy, and the guy was like, I think I was Jung in the last life. And Hawkins looked at him and was like, you were not Carl Jung. He's like, I know I was. He's like, how do you know? He's like, I've had some good cries. And, you know, David was actually mean to him. He was very, and Susan, his wife, wrote about this, that often David, as a spiritual teacher, would be gentle, but sometimes he would give him what they called the Zen whack because you needed it. And he's like, boy, you were not Carl Jung. He's like, can you muscle test it for me? He's like, I'm not going to do that. And he badgered him, and David did it. And he was like, he had the same practice we did earlier with his wife. And he said, this man was David Jung. No. He said, you weren't Jung. Well, as we start to, wrap up, one thing I want to ask is, like, who would you recommend seek out practices like this?
Ooh. Honestly, really anybody. It's so beneficial. I have experienced miraculous healing. I'm like talking shit about it, but I really have experienced miraculous healing from quantum healing. And I think it's just a really exciting time right now because more and more people are becoming open to these modalities. And I think it's just going to become as commonplace as like mindfulness meditation is now. Everyone's going to know what quantum healing is.
And honest to God, testimonial from me, like I had that somatic experience and like that was a stuck energy that would come up and be a bad feeling for me all the fucking time. Like people watch the show have known I've complained about it frequently. And after ours, it did actually significantly improve.
Yeah, you can. It's like the transformation is rapid too. Like it can just really happen super fast. So
I think a lot of people are becoming open to the thought that, hey, obviously therapy, counseling can be useful, but that a lot of perhaps our problems are caused by things that are more of the body. And among other things, these therapies do address those. Is there any like best practices or like advice you'd give to someone who's going to try one of these practices?
I would say it may be helpful to work with a practitioner because it can get kind of crazy. Like some of these like jumping timelines meditations and stuff. I'm all for it, but it can get kind of crazy if you're doing it by yourself sometimes. So maybe seeking someone out who can at least like create a I think for me, what I've learned about healing, the biggest thing is that healing is about like the divine facilitates healing, but it's about creating the container for the healing to take place. And that's really what the power of the practitioner is. So like finding someone who can, even if that's like just a friend, like someone who can hold that space to ground whatever you're doing. There's
definitely something to being in, the presence of another, the guidance of another, especially if they have some experience too. We're working with your subconscious. Maybe you want someone who knows their way around. What else would you like to say tonight on the show?
That you're awesome.
Well, I appreciate you. I really appreciate you coming on. I especially appreciate the experience with the Lifeline and the quantum healing because it really, all I can say is it was just crazy to me. It really did help.
Yeah.
It significantly opened me up and improved my mental health in a way that was noticeable quickly. Before we really end tonight, this is your opportunity to plug your shit, Jess.
Okay. So if you want to experience the incredible transformation that Gino has talked about for the last 45 minutes, I do sessions, Lifeline sessions for people. And me and 3 other women in the community are going to be facilitating a interactive date night that incorporates like some spiritual kind of unique practices for people who are sick of using the apps to meet people. So somehow I will get that information to your viewers.
Yes, and just for the viewers, it's going to be a local Chicago event. So you got to be in the Chicagoland
Chicago event in April, early April.
Fantastic. Well, again, Jess, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Gino.
Dope Jew, everybody.